54. Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 1557 into law on March 28th. That day, the Walt Disney Company issued a statement expressing its views that the legislation never should have been signed into law, that its goal as a company is for this law to be repealed by the legislature or struck down in the courts, and that the Walt Disney Company remains committed to supporting the national and state organizations working to achieve that. 55. On March 29th, Governor DeSantis said he thought the Walt Disney Company's March 28th statement had crossed the line and pledged to make sure we're fighting back in response to Disney's protected speech. 56. Governor DeSantis' memoir attacked Disney's speech and petitioning activity for expressing the wrong viewpoint. Quote, in promising to work to repeal the bill, he asserted, the company was pledging a frontal assault on a duly enacted law of the state of Florida, end quote. As a consequence of its disfavored speech and petitioning, he declared, quote, things got worse for Disney, end quote. 57. The governor promptly began his campaign of punishment. D. Governor DeSantis and the legislature dissolved the Reedy Creek Improvement District. On March 30th, so number 58, on March 30th, State Representative Spencer Roach disclosed for the first time that the legislature was considering dissolving RCID and announced, if Disney wants to embrace woke ideology, it seems fitting that they should be regulated by Orange County. Governor DeSantis had been orchestrating the move behind the scenes. As he recounts in his memoir, quote, I needed to be sure that the legislature would be willing to tackle the potentially thorny issue involving the state's most powerful company. I asked the House Speaker, Chris Sprouse, if he would be willing to do it, and Chris was interested. Okay, here's the deal, I told him. We need to work on this in a very tight circle, and there can be no leaks. We need the element of surprise. Nobody can see this coming, end quote. 59. On March 31st, Governor DeSantis quickly affirmed Representative Roach's statement, saying publicly, quote, we're certainly not going to bend a knee to woke executives in California. That's not the way the state's going to be run, end quote. 60. On April 19th, Governor DeSantis suddenly called for the legislature to expand a special session that had been scheduled to address redistricting. The new purpose of the session was to attack Disney by targeting just a handful of Florida's more than 1,000 independent special districts that were created before the passage of the 1968 Florida Constitution, like RCID. 61. Governor DeSantis conjured other rationales for the bill, including to, quote, ensure that the independent special districts are appropriately serving the public interest, end quote, and to, quote, consider whether such independent special districts should be subject to the special law requirements of the Florida Constitution of 1968 that prohibit special laws granting privileges to private corporations, end quote. 62. These rationales did not make sense. Only 6 independent special districts that were created before 1968 had not been reconstituted in the intervening years. Of those, RCID was the only district closely connected to a specific corporation. And in Governor DeSantis' memoir, he admitted that he found that there was this handful of other districts that also deserved scrutiny only after his staff worked with legislative staff in the House to target Disney. 63. When considered against the substance of the legislation, the pretext became especially transparent. The bill did nothing either to ensure that the independent special districts are appropriately serving the public interest, or consider whether such independent special districts should be subject to the special law requirements of the Florida Constitution of 1968 that prohibit special laws granting privileges to private corporations. Instead, under the bill, districts created before 1968 were preemptively scheduled for dissolution before the legislature took any analysis to determine whether the districts were serving the public interest, and before any determination as to whether they were subject to the special law requirements of the 1968 Florida Constitution at all. Had the legislature undertaken that analysis, it would necessarily have found that RCID served the public interest, as the Florida Supreme Court had already confirmed. See Reedy Creek Improvement District, and there's reference. And further, that RCID was not subject to the 1968 Florida Constitution's prohibition on special privileges granted to private corporations. rejecting as untenable the claim that Reedy Creek Enabling Act's provisions were oriented to serve primarily the benefit of that particular private enterprise. 64. On April 20th, Governor DeSantis sent a fundraising email warning that, quote, Disney and other woke corporations won't get away with peddling their unchecked pressure campaigns any longer, end quote, and that he would, quote, not allow a woke corporation based in California to run our state, end quote. 65. The campaign against Disney raced forward. The very same morning that Governor DeSantis issued his proclamation expanding the special session, identical bills were introduced in the Florida House and Senate providing for the dissolution of RCID. Florida House Bill 3C and Florida Senate Bill 4C each provided that any independent special district established by a special act prior to the date of ratification of the Florida Constitution on November 5th, 1968, and which was not reestablished, re-ratified, or otherwise reconstituted by a special act or general law after November 5th, 1968, is dissolved effective June 1st, 2023. 66. House sponsor Representative Randy Fine immediately announced, Disney is a guest in Florida. Today we remind them. Governor DeSantis just expanded the special session so I could file HB 3C, which eliminates Reedy Creek Improvement District, a 50-year-old special statute that makes Disney to exempt from laws faced by regular Floridians. 67. That same day, Representative Fine said to the Florida House State Affairs Committee, you kick the hornet's nest, things come up. And I will say this, you got me on one thing, this bill does target one company. It targets the Walt Disney Company. 68. Governor DeSantis' memoir describes the attack on Disney with pride. Quote, nobody saw it coming. And Disney did not have enough time to put its army of high-powered lobbyists to work to try to derail the bill. That the legislature agreed to take it up would have been unthinkable just a few months before. Disney had clearly crossed a line in its support of indoctrinating very young school children in woke gender identity politics, end quote. 69. The legislative process for Senate Bill 4C was highly unusual. When in the past the Florida legislature had dissolved a special district, the bills enacting the dissolution typically specified the plan for governance and management of district assets and obligations, including bond debt after dissolution. Community and Military Affairs Subcommittee Bill Analysis, House Bill 4191, describing earlier legislation that dissolved South Lake Worth Inlet District, transferred all property, assets, and debt to Palm Beach County, and clarified Palm Beach's rights and responsibility as part of the transfer, and required Palm Beach to establish an advisory committee to advise county commissioners on management of district's former territory. And there's a reference there. Which collectively dissolved the Port Everglades Authority Special District and transferred its operations and property to Broward County. 70. Senate Bill 4C, in stark contrast, described no plan for the disposition of RCID's assets, operations, or obligations, nor did the bill address how RCID's roughly $1 billion in municipal bond debt would be satisfied. 71. The legislative analysis accompanying the bill was cursory and provided no estimate of the full economic impact of dissolving RCID. The analysis identified no constitutional issues raised by the legislation. See Committee on Community Affairs Bill Analysis, Senate Bill 4C, Florida Legislature, 2022. 72. On April 20th, the Senate passed Senate Bill 4C. The House followed suit without legislative findings or a statement of purpose the very next day in a session without debate that lasted under 5 minutes. Orange and Osceola counties did not have time to conduct their own analysis. 73. After the vote, Senator Joe Gruder said, quote, Disney is learning lessons and paying the political price of jumping out there on an issue, end quote. The House bill's sponsor, Representative Fine, proudly confirmed that the legislature had looked at special districts only because, quote, Disney kicked the hornet's nest by expressing a disfavored political viewpoint. What changed, he said, was bringing California values to Florida. Christina Pushaw, then Governor DeSantis' press secretary, warned corporations that might consider expressing disfavored viewpoints. Quote, go woke, go broke, end quote. 74. On April 22nd, Governor DeSantis signed both Senate Bill 4C and Senate Bill 6C. At the signing ceremony, he said, for whatever reason, Disney got on that bandwagon. They demagogued the bill. They lied about it. Do you know what my view is? I was very clear about saying, you ain't influencing me. I'm standing strong right here. We signed the bill, and then incredibly, they say we are going to work to repeal parents' rights in Florida. And I'm just thinking to myself, you're a corporation based in Burbank, California, and you're going to marshal your economic might to attack the parents of my state? We view that as a provocation, and we are going to fight back against that. 75. Because the legislation was hastily enacted with no analysis or plan for disposition of RCID's assets or obligations, let alone daily operations, markets, constituencies, and RCID employees were concerned. 76. The same day the bill was signed, credit rating agency Fitch Ratings placed RCID's approximately $1 billion in outstanding bond debt on, quote, rating watch negative, end quote, based on the lack of clarity regarding the allocation of RCID's assets and liabilities. 77. Speculation spread that Orange and Osceola counties would absorb RCID's expenses and debts. Orange County tax collector Scott Randolph predicted Orange County would be saddled with RCID's obligations the minute that Reedy Creek is dissolved, resulting in a property tax increase of 20 to 25%. Senator Linda Stewart addressed this possibility. Quote, turning it over to Orange County and Osceola County would create the largest property tax increase in our history. We don't want this to happen. Our residents do not want this to happen. This has not been well thought out. End quote. At the same press conference, Senator Randolph Bracey called the plan harebrained and irresponsible, while Senator Victor Torres criticized Governor DeSantis for bragging about raising taxes on one of the largest private companies in the state and saying government has a right to punish companies for their private business decisions. 78. On May 16th, residents and taxpayers in Osceola County filed a lawsuit against Governor DeSantis, alleging that the dissolution of Reedy Creek would lead to $1 to $2 billion in increased taxes for residents of Central Florida. 79. Despite the chaos, the legislation's biggest boosters doubled down on their support. The House sponsor, Representative Fine, criticized Disney for taking a position on House Bill 1557 and warned that the company and others like it are, quote, now learning in Florida there's a cost to doing that, end quote. 80. In a June 6 interview, Governor DeSantis recalled that he had warned Disney not to participate in the public debate. Quote, I thought it was a mistake for Disney to get involved, and I told them, you shouldn't get involved. It's not going to work out well for you, end quote. Governor DeSantis said he believed it was his role as a leader to make sure people understand that Disney does not run the state of Florida, adding that we're not going to have our leadership subcontracted out to a corporation with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and that's based in Burbank, California. 81. During a September 15, 2022 speech, Governor DeSantis said of Senate Bill 4C, we took action after Disney made the mistake of opposing the legislation. 82. For months, no plan for implementing the Senate Bill 4C was released. As late as mid-September 2022, Governor DeSantis' press secretary told reporters, quote, we don't have an announcement to make at the moment about RCID, but stay tuned. 83. Absent any plan addressing the scheduled dissolution of RCID, Disney and other stakeholders were left to guess at how Governor DeSantis and the legislature might address the fallout. Florida Division of Bond Finance Director J. Ben Watkins III speculated about a successor district, but as of September 2022, high-ranking legislator Representative Daniel Perez admitted that the timeline for reaching a solution with RCID was still uncertain. 84. The months-long failure to propose a plan for the dissolution of RCID threatened Disney's operations, investments, and development plans. It also underscored the irregular process by which Governor DeSantis and the legislature had voted to abolish the district. E. Governor DeSantis and the legislature reconstitute and seize control of the district. In early October 2022, reports emerged that Governor DeSantis finally had developed a plan to seize control of Disney's governing body. The director of the Florida of Bond Finance revealed that Governor DeSantis would install state appointees on RCID's board. To accomplish this, Governor DeSantis would have the legislature create a successor agency that would function essentially unchanged from the original RCID, except that the new district would operate under the governor's thumb, cementing a political win for the governor. 86. 3 months later, Governor DeSantis posted a notice to the Osceola County website indicating his intent to seek legislation before the Florida legislature, doing just that. 87. In a statement after the notice was published, the governor's communications director confirmed that the new district's board would be state-controlled and heralded the corporate kingdom has come to an end. 88. On January 31st of 2023, a spokesperson for the governor's office announced that the governor expected a special session of the legislature the following week on Reedy Creek and other items. 89. Right on cue, just days later, the Florida legislature convened a special session to introduce House Bill 9B. 90. House Bill 9B was every bit the takeover that Governor DeSantis promised. Section 2 of the bill reenacted RCID's charter, but made key changes to consolidate power in the governor. Historically, the district had been governed by a board of supervisors that exercised the powers granted to the district. Under RCID's charter, did I say character earlier? I think I did. RCID's charter, board members were chosen through an election in which all landowners in the district were allotted 1 vote per acre of land owned in the district. This structure, common in special districts for economic development throughout Florida, was no secret and was in place when Florida's Supreme Court long ago confirmed that RCID served a public purpose. 91. House Bill 9B replaced the landowner election process with a board handpicked by the governor, subject to confirmation by the Florida Senate. Once selected, board members could serve for up to 12 years. The bill excluded from board service any person who in the last 3 years had worked for any organization that owns a theme park or entertainment complex with at least 1 million annual visitors. It also excluded any person with a relative who had done the same. 92. In one important respect, things remained unchanged. The bill left RCID's financial and contractual obligations intact. In particular, contracts that RCID entered before House Bill 9B's effective date would be unaffected, as the legislation made expressly clear. Specifically, all pre-existing contracts, debts, bonds, and other liabilities, quote, shall continue to be valid and binding on the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District in accordance with their respective terms, conditions, and covenants, end quote. Underscoring the point, the bill added, the provisions of this act shall be liberally construed in favor of avoiding any events of default or breach under outstanding bonds or other instruments of indebtedness of the district's existing and legally valid contracts. 93. House Bill 9B prevented the district's dissolution, which had been set to occur on June 1st, 2023 under Senate Bill 4C. It reaffirmed the district's continued existence under a new name, however, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. 94. House Bill 9B, like Senate Bill 4C, was a law designed to target Disney and Disney alone. It shifted the power to select the district's board from the district's landowners, including its majority landowner Disney, to the governor, to enable him to punish Disney for its protected speech about House Bill 1557. In comments to reporters on February 8, 2023, Governor DeSantis said of House Bill 9, quote, there's a new sheriff in town, and that's just the way it's going to be, end quote. 95. The legislature passed House Bill 9B within days of its special session introduction. 96. During the Florida Senate's February 10th floor session, Senator Doug Broxson underscored what was plain from the start. House Bill 9B was bare retaliation for Disney's failure to be apolitical. Senator Broxson was explicit about the bill's retaliatory intent. Quote, we joined with the governor in saying it was Disney's decision to go from an apolitical, safe 25,000 acres and try to be involved in public policy. We're saying you have changed the terms of our agreement, therefore we will put some authority around what you do, and I gladly join the governor in doing that. End quote. 97. On February 27th, Governor DeSantis signed House Bill 9B into law. In a related news release, the governor praised the legislation for ending the corporate kingdom of Walt Disney World and placing the district into state receivership. 98. The very next day, Governor DeSantis published his book titled The Courage to Be Free, Florida's Blueprint for America's Revival. To kick off the book's press tour, Governor DeSantis authored an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal that explicitly connected House Bill 9B to Disney's speech about House Bill 1557, criticizing what he called left-wing activists working at Disney's headquarters in Burbank. Governor DeSantis focused on Disney's opposition to Florida's House Bill 1557 and said, when corporations try to use their economic power to advance a woke agenda, they become political and not merely economic actors. In such an environment, reflexively deferring to big business effectively surrenders the political battlefield to the militant left. Leaders must stand up and fight back when big corporations make the mistake, as Disney did, of using their economic might to advance a political agenda. We are making Florida the state where the economy flourishes because we are the state where woke goes to die. 99. Indeed, Governor DeSantis has reaffirmed again and again that the state campaign to punish Disney for its speech about House Bill 1557 has been a coordinated and deliberate one from the start. Disney's commentary on House Bill 1557 was, he claimed, a declaration of war and a textbook example of when a corporation should stay out of politics.